Tonight, a community comes together in grief.
A hardworking person, loving person, a sweet person to be around with.
Remembering the father of 4 killed at random at a Toronto bus stop. We'll take you to a neighborhood vigil as the search for suspects spreads across the GTA and marking a grim milestone, 2 years since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Tonight, Canada pledges billions of dollars in new support. Plus,
for the terrorism charge, we felt a sigh of relief that at least this chapter of the legal aspect of what happened is finally coming to a close.
we hear from a young cousin of the Afzal family after a court ruling has now labeled the man who killed them a terrorist. How the family is moving forward and vowing to keep speaking out against hate.
This is CBC Saturday News.
Thanks for joining us. It was this time last week that we were learning the terrifying details of 2 back-to-back shootings near a Toronto bus stop less than 24 hours apart. A father of 4 was killed. This afternoon, the community came together as they struggle with their grief and wait for justice. Anam Khan has our top story.
A broken family in Ghana and a grieving community in Toronto.
I haven't been myself for a couple of days. I can still believe that my friend, somebody I'm taking care of, has passed.
The death of Adu Boakye hit hard for people across the community. Boakye, a 39-year-old newcomer to Canada, was one of 2 victims of 2 separate shootings near a bus stop at Jane and Driftwood last week. A 16-year-old boy was also shot and left with life-altering injuries. Police say both were shot indiscriminately while going about their day. Now, a vigil in Boakye's honor near the same bus stop.
And to the killer, or killers, you think you can strike fear in the heart of the community? Forget it.
Boakye's friend organized this vigil Saturday. He remembers how hardworking Boakye was.
He was going to send money to the wife and go do groceries for the long weekend.
While about 100 people gathered to march, lay flowers, and pay respect to Boakye, a family grieves back home. Boakye leaves behind a wife and 4 children. A member of the Ghanaian Canadian Association of Ontario, already visiting Kumasi, went to pay his respects to Boakye's family.
He is the breadwinner of the family. He came to seek a greener pasture so he could also get something for the family. Now look at what has happened to, him in Canada. See the children?
Richard Sinadorsu says the fundraiser will help cover day-to-day costs and even pay for flights so his family can visit Boakye's funeral in Canada. Toronto police took part in the vigil.
We will leave no stone unturned. We have committed all our resources, not only to bring the offender to justice, but to bring safety to this community.
Their command post set up last week remains near the Driftwood Community Centre to provide on-site trauma counseling. Toronto police continue to search for evidence in Stony Creek, where a black Acura RDX, believed to be involved in the weekend shootings in Toronto, was found. Anam Khan, CBC News, Toronto.
2 years of anguish and pain. Today marks 2 years since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Cities around the world and here in Canada gathering to reflect and show solidarity.
Our whole city stand with you. We salute you for the fight for freedom and democracy, respect and dignity. You are not alone.
That's Toronto Mayor Olivia Chow speaking at a rally at Nathan Phillips Square that was organized by the Ukrainian Canadian Congress. Meantime, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was in Ukraine today, pledging billions of dollars in new support. Margaret Evans is there.
This was a surprise visit. The Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau arriving by train overnight with his Italian and Belgian counterparts and the President of the European Commission. It was a trip of solidarity at a time when Ukraine's fighting forces are really struggling to hold the Russians back. Their first stop with the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky was the Hostomel airport, which is on the outskirts of Kyiv, and it's the site of a battle, or was the site of a battle on the very first day of the Russian invasion when Ukrainian fighters thwarted Russian plans to land troops and march on the capital.
Putin was sure he could easily take strategic targets like this airport. Well, we are standing here today because he was wrong.
Later, Prime Minister Trudeau signed a security cooperation agreement with the Ukrainian president, following in the footsteps of countries like France, Germany, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands. It doesn't offer concrete security guarantees, but it does come with a pretty big price tag, $3.02 billion for this year.
Justin, Mr. Prime Minister, I thank you for the agreement that opens up new capabilities for our security cooperation.
Canada has yet to fulfill some of the promises already made to Ukraine in terms of military hardware, and today's agreement doesn't necessarily mean immediate relief for Ukraine in terms of the ammunition and air defense systems they so desperately need. People here really are very worried indeed that that kind of help, that military aid, is not going to arrive soon enough to help their soldiers trying to fight the Russian forces and keep them on the other side of that front line. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Kyiv.
Meantime, Canada's Conservative leader was in Hamilton to mark the anniversary. Pierre Poilievre reaffirmed the party's commitment to supporting Ukraine, and he pointed to the threat that he says Vladimir Putin poses to other nations, including Canada.
We share the same threat. Putin has said he wants our Arctic. We know that once he defeats one country that he invades, he will move on to the next. His appetite for expansionism is insatiable. All those who wish to protect and preserve security around the world and defend the sovereignty of peoples everywhere must stand with Ukrainians who are fighting for us all.
The OPP and other police services across Eastern Ontario are warning about a recent rise in distraction thefts at grocery stores.
In these kinds of cases, the thieves engage a customer in conversation. They might ask about items they're buying or just chat. Meanwhile, another person is helping themselves to a wallet or purse in the victim's cart.
Police posting this video on social media today from a grocery store east of Ottawa, hoping someone recognizes the people in this video. The OPP say a pair of men were recently arrested in connection with a number of distraction thefts across Eastern Ontario. Officers say this can happen anywhere, even parking lots, and that things like backpacks and purses should be kept secure at all times. In Toronto, warming centers are open today due to the frigid temperatures. All locations except 58 Cecil Street remain open, and drop-in programs are also available throughout the day. Walk-ins are welcome. Ward Anderson is joining us for our first look at the forecast today. And you know, a bit of a surprise, Ward, feeling like, oh yeah, this is what the cold feels like.
Yeah, you know, Shannon, a lot of people probably woke up today a little bit shocked because the temperature did suddenly drop after we've had a good few days of spring-like temperatures. And in fact, the entire month of February has been warmer than normal for Ontario. Just the past 3 days that we had temperatures in the double digits, very rare for us. But the good news is there's more of that on the way. Not right away. We are going to keep it kind of cool for the next couple of days. We do have this trough coming through that's going to bring snow to northern Ontario, and parts of eastern Ontario may make its way over into our nation's capital. That's going to be coming through tomorrow on Sunday. Not a significant event. That's, of course, we're looking at about 3 centimeters to 5 centimeters. Nothing we're not used to, and much less than we're used to normally this time of year. But that's what we'll be looking at as we go into the next couple of days. It's going to stay cool and above freezing. But then as we get into midweek, look at that. We could get as high as 15 degrees in the GTA by the time we reach midweek.
Wow. Thanks, Ward. We'll talk to you shortly. Taking you to Kitchener now, where one building's tenants say they're being evicted for renovations. It's not the first time this particular landlord has been accused of rent-evictions. As Patrick Swadden explains, other Ontario cities and towns are fighting back.
For these folks, 250 Frederick Street in Kitchener is home, at least for now. Late last month, renters in one corner of the building handed eviction notices following a recent change in the building's ownership.
Do you feel like your unit needs renovations?
Not at all. Half of these people could be the next people living under bridges or living in the tents.
Many of them on pensions or ODSB, making a significant rent increase completely unfeasible.
Most of us are on a fixed income, so we can't afford it.
The building's tenants say they're worried rent will go up or they'll be replaced. Similar concerns were expressed to CBC News about the same landlord last year, where tenants on Webster Street in London are still fighting rent evictions. We reached out to the landlord but didn't receive a response. The tenants say they've been told plumbing work is needed, but
there's no building permits related to the plumbing and what they've stated they have to do.
Tenants do have the right to move back into their units once renovations are complete at the same monthly rent, but many don't know their rights. And according to some, the penalties to landlords for bad faith rent evictions are not enough to disincentivize the practice. The province says it's fighting the problem by building more rentals, adding we're taking action to protect renters from bad landlords by doubling the maximum fines under the Residential Tenancies Act, bringing them to $100,000 for individuals and $500,000 for corporations, the toughest fines in Canada.
13 landlords have been fined in the last 4 years, and of those that are fined, 4 have paid, and they've paid an average of $5,000. So
Ashlyn Clancy represents the area provincially and wants penalties to actually be levied.
Because we don't have protections like vacancy control or rent control after 2018, the rents can double or more than double. So
Clancy says the province needs vacancy control, which would limit how much landlords can raise the rent between tenancies, and protections for tenants who are often misled.
They'll say, oh, you have to stay out for 10 months. Meanwhile, the work takes 3 weeks.
Or, she says, evict tenants for cosmetic work that doesn't require vacancy. Without those protections, this municipality is taking things into its own hands.
Hamilton is now officially the first city in Ontario to pass an anti-rent eviction bylaw. And
Narinder Nan represents Ward 3 and says rental eviction notices increased nearly 1,000% in Hamilton over a 5-year period. Now, a new bylaw would require landlords to purchase a license to renovate, provide detailed breakdowns on why renovations are needed, and diligent updates to tenants.
A really important regulation that makes sure that the health and safety and dignity of residents isn't, tossed to the side in order to facilitate massive profit.
She says other municipalities across the province are considering their own bylaws. As for these tenants, they say they're not going anywhere.
We're not giving up. We're sticking to our guns.
Patrick Swadden, CBC News, Kitchener.
Both feel both a hollowness and a storm brewing within. We don't know if it's closure or justice.
That's family and friends of the Afzaal family standing outside a London courthouse on Thursday. That's when a judge ruled the man who deliberately drove his truck into 5 family members, killing 4 of them, committed an act of terrorism. He was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years. Now, it is that terrorism label that makes this case a landmark one. Joining me now is Isa Islam. He is a cousin of the family. He was there in court that day during that landmark ruling. Thanks so much for being here with us, Isa.
Thank you for the opportunity and having me.
I know you and your family have had a few days now since that moment, hearing the judge's decision. How are you all doing?
We're a very close family, so we've been supporting each other through this process. And especially after the terrorism charge, we felt a sigh of relief that at least this chapter of the legal aspect of what happened is finally coming to a close. Although the book is still being written, this chapter is at least coming to a close.
Yeah. You've talked to CBC throughout the trial, and you shared your hopes about getting that terrorism label, calling out hate for hate. Talk to us just about the significance of that and what it means to you personally.
Yeah, so historically speaking, this is the first time in Canada that white supremacy and an act of white supremacy has been called out as terrorism. Generally speaking, terrorism is only applied to, the stereotypical, some brown man or, of this religion or of this race. And it's never been this equally applied. And I think that's something that's really important, because as Canada, as a country, we need to recognize hate for hate. Hate does not discriminate against which race or which religion or anything that you are. If you hate someone, if you hate an innocent person and act upon that hate, then you are a terrorist. And it does not matter which groups in society you belong to. And that was something that was really important to me because, especially after the June 6th attack, we felt that Canada might not be the most equal place, but this ruling that the judge has made gives us that hope that Canada is still now prepared to call out hate for what it is.
You've talked about wanting to keep the momentum going, to continue speaking out against hate. What does that look like for you?
So, it can show itself in many forms. One of them is just doing interviews about talking about what has happened and raising awareness about Islamophobia and how we can condemn as well as dismantle it. On top of that, one thing that's been weighing on my mind, especially after these court proceedings have now finished, is the fact that, the offender, the terrorist, one of the things he wanted to put out there was that you don't need a gun to hurt people. He said in his manifesto and in his statements that he wanted to show a message that go use a vehicle and you can purport hate using pretty much anything. And one thing that I do want the courts to address at some point is possibly having a system in place where if you are found guilty of a crime, like using your vehicle as a weapon to kill people and to purport terrorism, then you should not be able to own a truck or have a driver's license in the future. Because right now, if at any point he comes on parole, the minimum is 25 years in jail, and then he has a chance to be put on parole. If he goes on parole, it makes me sick to think that he can still drive a vehicle and then he still has that power in his hands.
You were talking about how this is a chapter of your family's story and it's not the end. When you think about the next chapter for you and your family, what are you hoping for?
I see the next chapter, first of all, as we are a close family, and throughout every chapter, we'll always be supporting. We'll always be relying on each other as well as our faith, our religion, Islam, to strengthen ourselves. And beyond that, I see the next chapter as ensuring that something like this never happens again to any other minority and any other family. I never want, it sickens me to think that it's still possible for people to wake up and hear that their family has been killed because someone hated them just for who they were. One thing that I would like to add is that this court proceeding and this whole, all my experiences with the Canadian community since the attack on June 6th has shown me that there is hope, that my country, that Canada, still has a chance to condemn hate and terrorism wherever it is, done by whoever, and that we as Canadians will still stand strong together. And that hope is what keeps me going because, right after June 6th, that hope seemed very small. And I can safely say that the future is looking brighter, at least, than the past. This is at least what I'm hoping right now.
Isa, we thank you for taking the time to talk with us, to keep the conversation going. We really appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I haven't prepared, honestly, too much. I've been kind of just practicing certain countries while I've been practicing. So, I did a bit of Russia, which was really a weak point for me in the past. And then Brazil, Japan, did a bit of Canada, but I don't really need practice in that too much.
There he is, Toronto's Nathan Pfeffer, otherwise known as Fow, who is representing Canada at the GeoGuessr America's Regional Championships. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, that's okay. I just learned this today too. GeoGuessr is a geography-based game where players are dropped somewhere in the world, and the goal is to guess the location on the map based on the street view. Pfeffer says the game puts a lot more pressure on players than people think.
You wouldn't think that looking at an image on Street View and just sitting in a chair would elevate your heart rate that much, but it does. And so, yeah, it's really just it's just the nerves. Like if you're doing a test, but like imagine doing a test and having like 10 to 70,000 people watching you. Yeah.
So impressive. The America's Regional Finals wrap up on Sunday in Sweden, where $1,400 US is on the line, plus a trip to the World Cup Finals. Ward is back, chilly today, but talking about another warm-up on the way.
Well, people have been asking me, is the spring weather going to continue? Is it going to come back? And the good news is, yes, it's going to come and it's going to go. But it has been warmer than we're used to, as you know, across the province. The fact that we've had the past few days in the double digits is very rare for this time of year for us. And it is going to continue after a few more days of cold weather. But it's been so warm that we weather people are asking, is Ottawa even going to see minus 20 this year? So far it hasn't, only about minus 17. Also very rare for this time of year. But I know many people in our nation's capital aren't complaining about that. Coming through tomorrow, we have this trough that's going to come through, and it's going to bring snow in northern Ontario and out east, out to our nation's capital and into Quebec. This isn't a significant event. It's not a significant amount of snow. We're talking about 3 centimeters to 5 centimeters in places like Timmins when we get further up north. But definitely not something we're not used to, and I wouldn't call it a major event. It's certainly not a major event for this time of year for us in Ontario like we're used to. But we're used to way more snow than this. Usually we're sitting at about 111 centimeters or more. We haven't even hit 50 centimeters yet. I know for those of you that don't like the snow, that sounds like a great early spring. But that's what we're looking at for the next few days. We're going to keep temperatures right above freezing, and then midweek they're jumping up into the teens, and we'll get some precipitation that'll come with it.
Okay, thanks so much, Ward. That's our show for you tonight. Thanks for watching. We're going to leave you now with some video of people enjoying the Rideau Canal Skateway in Ottawa today. The portion of Bank to Pretoria opened at noon. Now, this could be one last hurrah this season. As you heard Ward just say, warmer temperatures are expected to set in next week. We'll see you again soon.